And then you got the
Xeris.
the Xeris spook, old reliable. This is probably my favorite. The old Skitter Walk by Rapala.
Make sure you have more than one in the box because Mike will take that one on you.
And also Mirror Lure makes a Mirror Lure topwater bait. You can hear them rattles in it. This one will work just about on the surface, just a little under. That's a real good bait. They just started coming out with that one last year, I believe. Real good bait. I know you see the bait showering. We got bait in here showering everywhere. We don't know if it's reds or if it's trout, but something's working here. We're throwing some topwater bait to start with. We'll start out with the topwater, and we'll switch over later on in the day when the sun gets up to more than likely maybe spinner baits or jigs. But definitely, if you see trout crushing baits on the surface, throw your topwater. Trout they have an air sac. They fill that thing up with water. I mean, with air, they'll suspend in 20 foot of water right underneath the surface and be feeding on the surface. And if you're throwing jigs, you're throwing underneath them.
All right, targeting those speckled trout, quite often we find ourselves in deeper water. We typically use jigs. Jigs tipped with some type of soft bait, whether it's a scented soft bait or whether it's a non-scented bait like the traditional Mr. Twisters and Gotcha grubs. Typically, Mike and I are usually using light jig heads if possible. We use the lightest jig head possible for each situation. When we find ourselves fishing several feet of water, just 2, 3, 4, 5 foot of water and stagnant water, we'll use a real light jig head. This is an 1/8 ounce model. We'll go down to a 1/16 ounce model, and we'll actually trim the head a little bit too, kind of directional trim it so it's digging into the water, and we'll go down to a 32nd of an ounce. And we're usually choosing, for us ourselves, we really like those Berkeley Gulp baits, the scented baits, and we're using the 3 and 4 inch pogies depending on temperature. As it gets colder in the wintertime, we'll scale down to the 3 inch pogies. If the bite's hot in the fall, we'll use the 4 inch pogies and the 4 inch shrimp as well. But again, we're using those real light jig heads in shallow water or in in conditions where there's not much current.
I don't need net. It's not that big. It's just decent. Trout. That's what was exploding on them baits right here.
Corky.
I think we found some trout here. It's about the 3rd cast after I caught that last one. Got him hooked up here. Feels like another decent trout. Yeah.
Decent, that's a nice trout there.
Yeah, nice trout. Oh yeah.
We find ourselves in deeper water, for instance, like fishing the rock jetties or fishing some of the edges near the inlets. For us down our way, like Brown's Inlet and stuff like that, Bear Inlet, we got some deeper water, 10 foot or better of water. And you're not going to get that bait down deep. And when you're fishing that strong current near those inlets, like Mike talked about earlier, those fish can suspend. They'll do a little less suspending and more hiding behind eddies formed off from the bottom, off the points of marsh, or little pockets formed off from shells and dips in the sand. So a lot of times those fish are down on the bottom in the current versus in the stagnant water. So then we got to step up in size. And you can use, again, these unpainted jig heads, or we'll step up a lot of times, these little heavier jig heads here. And, we'll go as high as a 1/4 ounce. Typically we're around an 1/8 ounce, but again, deep water we might go as high as a 1/4 ounce. And again, you can tip them with these soft baits. The other thing to think about too is, how that bait is sinking in the water. And sometimes we'll step down to a real light bait, something that has less density, like the 4 inch pogies and the 4 inch shrimp. They're real dense. They got a lot of liquid in them. As a matter of fact, if you've ever let a Berkeley Gulp dry out, they'll shrink up to about half their size. Just to show you how much liquid juice is in these things. But we can step down to a soft jerk bait like this, which is very light. Also pick up one of our really light jig heads, 32nd of an ounce, and now we can fish. Maybe not necessarily shallow water. We can definitely fish shallow water, but we can let, like Mike said, when those fish are suspending, we can go ahead and work that real slow, and even though there's a jig head on it, we can work it like a suspending bait. And it's just, if you can keep that bait in the water column, keep it off the bottom from sitting and digging in the bottom, a lot of times you just get incredible strikes. It just drives them crazy. So pretty much, that's what we're looking at for working jig heads. Is the size of the jig head, the weight of the jig head, depends on the depth of the water and how strong that current is.
Trout. Nice one. Put the old pink pogey on.
As I'm target casting to this tree, which I haven't caught a fish on yet, Mike's just caught 3 fish out in the middle of nowhere out here to the right.
Look, there's a shrimp whisker hanging out of his mouth.
Yeah, there is. Look at that.
He just fed on a shrimp in here. That's his whisker. The old pink pogey.
Stinky pink.
Just a couple things here. I run a trip here last week to one of the jetties on the coast here, and I think we went through probably about 12 or 15 packs of gulp because the pinfish and the bluefish were bad. In them situations, you'll want these gotcha grubs. They work well, and without the scent, the pinfish doesn't hit them as bad. And just, a couple other things. Let's see here. These power bait shrimp, when that water is clear and they're feeding more of sight, these seem to, I've seen they'll catch better than a gulp just because of the real look to it.
It's got a more natural look, a little more natural presentation to it.
Yeah, so that's a deadly bait. Right
They're also
there.
loaded with scent. They've got a lot of scent packed in that power bait as well. So.
And then, on the trolling motor in the rivers, searching for trout, we will use the 4-inch bait only because we can throw it twice as far as a 3-inch bait. I mean, we put a 16th ounce head on there, trim it down. This bait will run 6 inches under the surface, or you can use it heavier. Put a heavier head, but you can throw it a mile, and you can really cover some area with it.
It really helps in those conditions. There's a lot of wind. Wind involved.
Wind situation, definitely.
Talking about targeting speckled trout, folks, there's several different rigs you can use involving corks. And one of those is actually a slip cork or slider cork rig. And it's a tough one to set up. It takes 5 or 10 minutes to set up, so you want to keep an extra rod on board rigged with this, where you don't plan on changing it all day long. It consists basically of a few pieces. Right here, right on top of my thumb here, I've got a little pink string there. It's actually one of these. We call them stopper strings. They come on little pieces of straw that look like coffee straw, and they come equipped with an extra bead there, beads in the package. And basically what we're doing is we're taking our material, which is our fishing line, and we're using Berkeley braid here, Berkeley fire line, and we slide that little string up on the line. You pull the coffee straw out, put it in the trash can, tighten this down. You tighten that knot down. You don't want to cinch it down yet. You want to slide it, get it away, and just make it snug on the line because you're going to want to adjust it after you get the rig put together. As soon as you put that stopper string on, the next thing you're going to do is slide the bead on, and eventually a real sharp hook that I put in the seat down here. And you're going to slide that little bead they put in the package on, and basically what happens is the string stops the bead. After the bead, you're going to slide on your slip cork, and there's a variety of adjustable slip corks out there. I think Billy Bay makes one right here that's actually has a wire inside of it. Helps it stand up. It's visible. That little red piece pops up in the air, and when a fish strikes it, that little red top there will pull down to the cork, and you have kind of a visual that you've got a fish on, as well as the fact that you've got a nice bright cork and a piece of cork raised up in the water column in case it's kind of rough or choppy. So you slide your slip cork on, and like I said, the string stops the bead. Well, the bead stops the cork. And then below that, we basically have some type of lead weight. We use sometimes, depending on the conditions, the tide and the current, we use egg weights, small egg weights, or we use little split shot, so you can just crimp on one of the two. So that's below the split shot, we basically have our leader material, our swivel, a piece of leader, and a hook of your choice. If you're planning on keeping if you're into some big fish, we typically don't use a lot of treble hooks on our speckled trout. Mike was in some big fish the other day, and this is a rig he had tied on. The one thing you don't want to lose is a big fish. So if you're around a lot of small fish, we'll use a circle hook, and I think we've got a few of them right here. Here's some Baidachi, little circle hooks. And that'll keep, typically he'll hook a speckled trout in his lip, in the side of his jaw. He doesn't swallow the hook, or if he does, it usually pulls out to the side of his jaw, and you don't gut hook him. and you can release that fish alive. But when you're in the big ones, you don't want to lose them, and you don't mind so much if he's gut hooked. You're going to we're going to put him in the cooler. We are. So we've got a treble hook on this one. We usually have anywhere from 1 foot to 2 foot of leader material. We like to use anywhere from a 25 to 30 pound test fluorocarbon material. Fluorocarbon is a little bit stronger against abrasion on the bottom, because our bait again is sinking down close to the bottom. Sometimes it is on the bottom. So we use a fluorocarbon leader, and like I said, we use about 12 inches to 24 inches depending on the conditions, and a swivel there. So basically what's happened is, as we go from location to location, we're able to adjust this stopper string for the depth of the water. Like Mike was talking about earlier, if we're fishing, in some shallow water that's 2 or 3 feet, I can take that little stopper string and I can slide it right down within 1 or 2 feet of my sinker. And now what's going to happen, and when I cast it out there, my weight's going to pull the line through my cork only to that adjusted depth. And it might take a few minutes depending on your situation where you're at, but you can figure out the depth of the water. If your cork starts hanging over like this, leaning over constantly, you've set it too deep. It's shallower than what you have it set at. So you bring it up, you adjust it a little bit shallower, until finally this cork drifts down the shoreline or the embankment. Maybe bumps bottom every now and then, but you're not just hanging on the bottom. Getting some deep water condition situations out of one of the rock jetties or the deeper areas near the inlets, you can slide that string up to 5 or 10 or 15, 20 feet, wherever you want, but it still allows you to reel your entire leader, your whole rig, all the way up when you want to, for casting purposes. Mm-hmm. Versus some other rigs that we use involving corks, which Mike's going to tell you about now, which don't quite give you that same advantage for fishing deep water. They're more shallow water rigs. Mike, can you tell them about that?
Yeah. Another cork is the popping cork. Tommy's trying a popping cork rig.
There he is. Another little one.
That's what we're getting all them hits.
Mm-hmm.
And small fish.
Couldn't get that big hook in them.
We'll use this mainly in probably 6 feet or less, 7 feet or less. And what you can do is tie anywhere from a 2 to 4 foot leader. You don't want to tie it too long, because then it's hard to cast. But that noise right there will attract the fish to your bait, and this power bait works real well underneath it. But any bait that you find that you're catching them on, the grubs, the 4-inch pokey, whatever you want to use, but that noise right there, it's like a top water, and that's another thing. It's like it attracts them, that noise. But then you have your bait underneath. When they're not taking that top water bait and they're hitting it behind it, but they don't want to strike it, throw your popper cork. They'll put about 2 foot underneath your popper cork. They'll take it every time. It's a nice trout right here. Best one of the day, I believe. Oh yeah. Fish there's, he's pushing 3 pounds. Had a little break in action. Thought they were gone, but last 2 casts I had one on. Lost him, and now I got this one here. Another nice trout. Big trout.
Yeah.
Another one we have is the Billy Bay, and this is the slider. If you want to use just the rig Jeff just